The party was held in a sleek downtown hotel, the kind of place where everything gleamed, polished marble floors, chandeliers casting soft, golden light over the room, and corporate logos subtly displayed on banners. It was all about showing off success, the company's vision of unity and growth. But as I stood there with a half-empty glass of wine, I felt completely out of place. I never liked these events. They always felt contrived, an opportunity for people to boast about their accomplishments under the guise of small talk. Sarah, though, loved them. She floated through the room effortlessly, laughing at jokes, her hand resting lightly on someone's arm as she made a point. She was in her element, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little proud of her ability to command attention. But tonight, something felt different. There was a distance between us, there had been for a while, really, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. I was about to check my phone when I noticed someone approaching from the side. It was Chris. He worked in sales, and we'd crossed paths more times than I could count. He was one of those guys who could charm the room, always had a story to tell, always wore the right thing. I didn't particularly like him, but I had no reason to dislike him either. We existed in separate worlds at work. "Hey man," Chris said with a grin as he approached. He held up his drink in a mock toast. "Hiding out in the corner too, huh?" I chuckled, forcing a smile. "Yeah, you know how these things go." "Not really my scene." "Same here," he said, stepping closer. "But you gotta make an appearance, right? Office politics and all that." "Right," I muttered, glancing over at Sarah, who was still deep in conversation with a group of people across the room. Chris followed my gaze and gave a knowing nod. "Wife dragged you here, huh? Happens to the best of us." I shrugged. "Yeah, something like that." For a moment, we both stood there in silence, the murmur of the party filling the gaps in the conversation. Then Chris leaned in slightly, lowering his voice as if he was about to share some juicy piece of gossip. "You know," he said, grinning like we were old buddies, "I probably shouldn't be saying this, but there's this woman I've been seeing. Total knockout, man. We've been sneaking around for a while." I blinked, caught off guard. The way he was speaking, so casual, like it was no big deal. "Oh," I said, feigning disinterest, but my curiosity piqued. "Someone from the office?" He laughed softly and took a sip of his drink. "Yeah, actually. You probably know her. Her name's Sarah." Time seemed to slow. "Sarah. My Sarah." I felt the glass tremble in my hand. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what he'd just said, trying to convince myself I'd misheard. But I hadn't. He said her name with such confidence, like there couldn't possibly be another Sarah he could be talking about. My throat tightened, but I somehow managed to keep my voice steady. "Sarah, huh?" I said, a weak laugh escaping my lips. "Sounds risky." Chris nodded, clearly enjoying his own bravado. "It is, man, but that's part of the fun, right? She tells me her husband's this clueless guy, always wrapped up in his own world. Doesn't even know she's stepping out." The world felt like it was spinning. I gripped the edge of the table next to me, willing myself to stay composed. I couldn't let him see the storm brewing inside me. "Not yet. You ever worry he'll find out?" I asked, my voice tight. Chris shrugged, clearly unconcerned. "Nah, she's got it all under control. We're careful. Besides, it's just an affair. No strings attached, right?" He grinned again, and for the first time, I saw him for who he really was, selfish, arrogant, and oblivious to the damage he was causing. I wanted to punch him right there, in the middle of the room, but I held myself back. Instead, I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and gave a hollow laugh. "Sounds thrilling," I said. Chris, oblivious to my inner turmoil, continued talking. "You have no idea, man. We've been sneaking around for a few months now. Hotel rooms, late-night meetups. It's like something out of a movie. She's really something, though. Keeps saying she's not happy at home. Her husband's a bit of a bore, you know." I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to tell him just how wrong he was about me. Instead, I nodded and forced a smile. Yeah, I can imagine. It was getting harder to breathe. My head was pounding, my vision tunneling. I needed to get out of there before I did something I'd regret. Well, I should probably get going, I said, setting my drink down on a nearby table. Nice catching up, Chris. Yeah, you too, man, he said, completely oblivious to the bombshell he'd just dropped on me. Maybe we'll grab a beer sometime. I mumbled something in return and made a beeline for the exit. Once I was outside, the cool night air hit me like a slap in the face. I sucked in a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions raging inside me. Sarah. My wife. With him, the pieces started to click into place, the late nights, the sudden increase in work trips, the way she'd been distant, emotionally and physically, for months. I'd noticed it, of course I had, but I never imagined this. I never thought she would go behind my back like this. Standing there on the sidewalk, the city lights blurring in the distance, I felt a sharp stab of betrayal. But beneath the pain, a cold rage began to simmer. Chris had no idea who I was, no idea that the clueless husband he'd been talking about was standing right in front of him. I wouldn't let this slide. Not for a second, but first, I needed to be sure. I needed proof. And once I had it, I'd make them both regret ever thinking they could get away with this. The next few days felt like a blur, each moment stretching into an agonizing eternity. I transformed into a man on a mission, consumed by the need for clarity and revenge. Every interaction with Sarah became a delicate game of masks, each conversation a choreographed dance where I had to act like everything was fine. I could hardly look her in the eye, and the warmth that once characterized our marriage had grown cold. When she asked if I wanted to join her for dinner one night, I forced a smile. I've got some work to catch up on, I said, my voice a little too strained. You go ahead. I'll be fine. Okay, but don't stay up too late, she replied, her brow furrowing with concern. I miss you, you know. I nodded, though my heart felt like a lead weight. Once she left the room, I pulled out my laptop, my pulse quickening as I prepared to dig deeper into the abyss I had stumbled upon. It was time to put my plan into action. I had installed a tracking app on her phone weeks before, a precaution I had thought unnecessary at the time. Now, it became my lifeline. I opened the app and watched her movements closely. Each dot on the map represented her location, and my heart raced as I traced her path through the city, each red pin marking a rendezvous with Chris. There was one hotel, in particular, that popped up more frequently than I wanted to see, the Grand Vista. Late one evening, after she returned from a supposedly late-night meeting, I couldn't hold back any longer. She walked in, radiant and smiling, and the sight made my insides twist. I casually asked, "How was the meeting?" "It was fine, pretty standard stuff," she replied, brushing off my question with a wave of her hand. "Just a few updates on the project. Is Chris still working on that with you?" I asked, my tone casual but laced with an underlying tension. "Yeah, he is. He's been really helpful," she said, a little too quickly. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but I could feel the heat rising in my chest. "Good to hear he's pulling his weight." As Sarah prepared herself for bed, I seized my moment. "You know, I bumped into Chris the other day at the party," I said, watching her reaction closely. "He mentioned you a few times." Her face tightened, and she turned to look at me, confusion clouding her features. "Oh. What did he say?" "Just that he thinks you're a great colleague," I replied, suppressing a smirk. But it sounded like there was more to it. More to it? "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. I took a breath, knowing I was treading dangerous ground. "Let's just say he seemed a little too friendly. You know how office romances can get." Sarah's expression shifted from confusion to defensiveness. "You think I'm having an affair with Chris? That's ridiculous. We're just colleagues." I held her gaze, refusing to back down. "Are you sure about that?" Her eyes flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flash of guilt. But she quickly masked it with anger. "How could you even think that? You know me better than that." I didn't respond, letting the silence hang in the air. I could feel the tension building, and part of me relished the uncertainty I had created. That night, as I lay awake in bed, my mind raced with possibilities. I needed more than just suspicion. I needed proof, undeniable evidence that could shatter her carefully constructed facade. The next day, I continued my surveillance, closely monitoring her movements. My instincts were correct, she was at the Grand Vista again. My gut twisted as I realized this was where Chris had taken her more than once. I decided to confront Chris again, but this time, I wanted to catch him off guard. I waited until the weekend, when I knew he'd be at the local bar with friends. I arrived early, nursing a drink while keeping an eye on the door, my heart pounding with anticipation. Finally, Chris walked in, laughing and joking with his buddies. I felt a surge of adrenaline and moved to intercept him as he made his way to the bar. "Hey, Chris!" I called out, stepping in front of him. His smile faltered for just a moment before he composed himself. "Oh, hey. Didn't see you there, can we talk?" I said, my tone serious. Sure, what's up?" He gestured toward a quieter corner, and we stepped away from the noise of the bar. I took a deep breath, knowing I had to tread carefully. "I know about you and Sarah." His expression shifted to one of confusion, then amusement. "What? Come on, man, that's not funny." "I'm not joking," I said, keeping my voice low but firm. "You need to stop seeing her. I know where you've been meeting." His eyes widened slightly, the humor evaporating from his face. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play coy with me," I replied, pulling out my phone and showing him a screenshot of one of their messages. "I have proof. You're messing with my wife." Chris stared at the screen, his bravado crumbling. "Look, I didn't know she was married," he stammered, but the desperation in his voice only fueled my anger. "You need to end it. Today," I demanded, feeling the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Or I'll make sure everyone knows." He hesitated, glancing around as if searching for an escape. Okay, I'll end it. Just, don't do anything crazy. Don't test me," I said, my voice cold. "I will ruin you if I have to." As I walked away, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. I had taken control of the situation, and soon I would have the final pieces I needed. I had no intention of letting this slide. I would make them both pay for their betrayal. Back at home, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. I opened the tracking app again and watched as Sarah's location flickered, pinpoints illuminating her movements around the city. The anger bubbled up again as I realized she was back at the Grand Vista once more. I was determined to gather all the proof I needed. I would confront her, but not before I had everything laid out before me, a master plan that would reveal her deception and force her to reckon with the truth. The truth would unfold, and I would be ready. The days dragged on as I gathered more evidence, each piece of proof fueling the storm of anger and betrayal inside me. I became meticulous, tracking Sarah's movements and documenting her late-night outings with Chris. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined, and I was determined to make them pay for it. I spent countless hours crafting a plan in my mind, an ultimatum that would expose the truth once and for all. After a long week, I finally had everything I needed: a collection of text messages, a series of location pings, and a detailed timeline of her deceit. I felt both empowered and hollow. The man I once was slowly being replaced by a vengeful stranger, and the closer I got to confronting her, the more anxious I became. One evening, I decided to confront Sarah directly. I had spent the day preparing myself, rehearsing the conversation over and over in my head. I needed to keep my emotions in check, to stay calm and collected while I laid everything out before her. As I set the stage, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. When Sarah came home that night, she was cheerful, her hair neatly tied back and a bright smile on her face. "Hey, honey. I brought your favorite takeout," she said, entering the kitchen with a bag in hand. "Thanks," I replied, my voice betraying none of the turmoil churning inside me. "Can we talk first?" Her smile faltered slightly, but she nodded. "Sure. What's on your mind?" I motioned for her to sit at the dining table, my heart pounding as I prepared to lay out my evidence. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to maintain a calm exterior. I need you to be honest with me, Sarah. No more lies. Okay, she said slowly, concern creeping into her voice. I know about you and Chris, I stated, my voice steady and unwavering. Her expression shifted instantly, confusion washing over her face. What do you mean? I know about the affair, I said, pushing my phone across the table toward her, the screen displaying snippets of their messages. This isn't a joke. I have proof. Her eyes widened as she picked up my phone and scanned the messages. The color drained from her face. I didn't think you'd find out, she stammered, looking up at me, her expression a mix of guilt and fear. You didn't think I'd find out? You've been so careless, Sarah. Meeting him at hotels, lying to my face. I felt a surge of anger but forced myself to keep it contained. How long has this been going on? She hesitated, looking down at the table. A few months, but it didn't mean anything. It was just a mistake, just a mistake. I repeated incredulously, my voice rising. You think cheating on me is just a mistake? Do you even understand how deeply you've hurt me? She opened her mouth to respond but quickly shut it, as if realizing there were no words to defend herself. I'm sorry. I never meant for you to find out this way. Sorry doesn't cut it anymore, Sarah. This is bigger than you think. I leaned in closer, my heart racing as I felt the weight of the moment. I need you to end it with Chris. No more excuses, no more meetings. If you don't, I'll go to HR, and I'll make sure everyone knows about this affair. Her eyes widened, fear flickering across her face. You wouldn't do that. I won't let you get away with this. You have 1 week to end it, I said firmly, my voice low and steady. If I see you at that hotel again, if I find even one more text message between you two, I will expose everything. Sarah shook her head, her voice trembling. Please, let's not do this in public. It could ruin my career. I can fix this, I swear. Fix it? How? By lying to me some more. I shot back. You're the one who put us in this position. You've destroyed my trust. If you want to save our marriage, you need to make a choice. Her hands shook as she grasped the edge of the table, visibly torn between guilt and fear. I need time to think, to process all of this. You have until next Saturday, I said, my tone final. No more delays. No more second chances. If you can't do that, then I'm done. Sarah sat back in her chair, her expression a mix of despair and anger. You don't understand how complicated this is. No, I do understand, I replied, my voice steady. I understand that you chose to betray me. Now it's time to choose again, this time, choose me. I stood up, feeling a wave of satisfaction mixed with nausea as I walked away from the table. I could hear her breath hitch as I left the room, the gravity of the moment settling over us both like a heavy fog. In the silence of the house, I felt both powerful and hollow. I had put my foot down, but the reality of the ultimatum weighed heavily on my heart. I glanced back at Sarah, who remained seated, her face buried in her hands, and wondered if the love I once knew could ever survive this. As I stepped into the living room, I realized that I had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. The truth was out, and the clock was ticking. Now it was a matter of whether she would choose me or continue down the path of betrayal. With the next week stretching out before me, I braced myself for what lay ahead. The stage was set, and the countdown had begun. The week dragged on like a bad dream, each day filled with anticipation and dread. I barely slept, replaying my confrontation with Sarah over and over in my mind. Would she choose to end the affair, or would she continue lying to my face? The tension in our home was palpable, an electric charge that made every conversation feel like walking on eggshells. On Saturday morning, the day of reckoning arrived. I awoke early, my heart pounding as I prepared for what I knew was going to be a pivotal moment in my life. I had decided to attend the company gala that evening, armed with evidence and a plan. I had reached out to a couple of friends in HR, subtly planting the seeds of what was to come. As I sat at the breakfast table, Sarah entered, looking as fragile as I felt. Good morning, she said softly, her voice lacking its usual brightness. "Morning," I replied, my heart racing as I considered the day ahead. "Have you given any thought to our conversation?" She hesitated, staring at her untouched plate. "I have, and I want to make things right. I'll talk to Chris. I promise." I studied her, searching for any sign of sincerity. "You know, actions speak louder than words, Sarah. Talking won't be enough. You need to cut him out of your life completely." "I will. I swear I will," she said, her eyes pleading. Can we talk about this later? Today is important for both of us." "It's the gala." I forced a nod, though the idea of attending the gala felt like torture. "Fine. But remember, you have until tonight to prove it to me." As the evening approached, the atmosphere in our home shifted. I put on my best suit, the fabric feeling constricting as I fastened my tie. The mirror reflected a man who was ready to unveil the truth, but I still felt the pang of uncertainty in my gut. What if she didn't follow through? When we arrived at the gala, the venue was dazzling. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm light over the sea of elegantly dressed guests. I tried to push the anxiety aside as we mingled, forcing a smile and exchanging pleasantries with colleagues. But the moment Chris arrived, my blood boiled. He entered with his usual bravado, scanning the room until his gaze landed on Sarah. The way he smiled at her felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I watched as they exchanged a few words, and I felt the familiar knot of anger tightening inside me. "Excuse me for a moment," I said to Sarah, my voice clipped. "Where are you going?" she asked, her eyes widening. "Just need to talk to someone," I replied, making my way toward Chris, my heart pounding. "Hey, man," Chris said as I approached, his grin bright but fading as he noticed the tension in my posture. "You look sharp tonight." "Cut the pleasantries, Chris," I said, my voice low and intense. "We need to talk. Now." "Sure, what's up?" he replied, feigning nonchalance. "I'm giving you your chance to end things with Sarah." "She said she would, but I have my doubts," I said, leaning in closer so only he could hear. "You and I both know this can't go on. You need to end it, or I will make sure everyone finds out about your little affair." Chris's expression shifted, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. "Listen, man, it's not like that. We had a connection, and—" "Stop right there," I interrupted. "You're going to end it. No more meetings, no more texts. You understand?" He hesitated, and I pressed on, my voice low and menacing. "If I find out you haven't, you'll regret it. I promise you." Chris swallowed hard, his bravado crumbling under the weight of my ultimatum. Okay, I'll talk to her. Just chill out." "Good. You have until tonight," I warned, stepping back and feeling a rush of satisfaction. I turned and walked away, leaving him to ponder the consequences of his actions. Returning to Sarah, I found her speaking with some colleagues, laughter ringing out as if everything were perfectly fine. I forced a smile, but inside, the tension continued to build. The gala was about to reach its climax, and I could feel the moment of unveiling approaching. As the evening progressed, I watched the clock tick closer to the moment I had planned. My heart raced as the host stepped up to the microphone, announcing the next segment of the evening. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special presentation for you tonight." I exchanged a glance with Sarah, whose smile faltered as she sensed my intensity. "What is this?" she asked, worry creeping into her voice. "Just a little surprise," I said, my tone dark with meaning. The lights dimmed, and a projector flickered to life, casting images on the screen. I felt a rush of adrenaline as the first slide appeared, a photo of Chris and Sarah at the Grand Vista, taken from a distance, her arm draped around his shoulders. Gasps echoed in the room, and I felt a thrill of power. "Tonight, we're going to discuss transparency and honesty in our workplace," the host began, oblivious to the storm brewing. "Let's take a look at what that really means." As the presentation unfolded, I watched Sarah's expression shift from confusion to horror as more images flashed across the screen, messages, locations, and even snippets of conversations I had collected. The air in the room thickened with tension as whispers spread among the guests. "Is that Sarah breathed, her eyes wide with disbelief. Exactly what it looks like, I replied, my voice cold. The room erupted into murmurs, and I could see Chris's face pale as he realized the extent of the betrayal being revealed. "What the hell, man?" he hissed, his voice barely above a whisper. I stepped forward, meeting his gaze with steely resolve. "You wanted to play, Chris. Now everyone knows the game you've been playing. Enjoy the consequences." The crowd grew restless as the truth hung in the air, palpable and heavy. Sarah stood frozen, her hands trembling at her sides. I took a step closer to her, watching as realization washed over her face, her expression a mix of horror and regret. "Why?" she finally managed, her voice breaking. "Why would you do this?" "Because you chose him over us," I said, my tone unwavering. "You didn't think I would fight back." As the presentation concluded, I turned my attention back to Chris. "This isn't over. You have until the end of the night to figure out how to salvage your career and your reputation." I stepped away from the crowd, my heart racing with adrenaline and anger. I needed to confront him one last time, away from the prying eyes of our colleagues. I made my way outside, the cool night air hitting my face as I searched for him, the tension radiating off me in waves. I found him leaning against his car, his expression a mix of anger and despair. "You've crossed a line, man," he spat, his voice low. "Crossed a line?" I echoed, stepping closer. "You crossed the line when you decided to betray me. You brought this on yourself." He pushed off the car, fists clenched. "You think you can ruin my life and get away with it?" "I don't just think it. I know it," I replied, the coldness in my voice matching the fury brewing inside me. "And if you don't end things with Sarah, this is just the beginning." In that moment, I felt a surge of power that had been absent for far too long. Without a second thought, I picked up a nearby rock and smashed it against the window of his car. The shattering glass echoed in the night, a sound so satisfying it made my heart race. Chris stared at me, shock etched on his face. "You're insane." "No, I'm just done playing nice," I shot back. "You'll think twice before crossing me again." As I walked away from the chaos I had unleashed, I felt a mixture of exhilaration and dread. The unveiling had exposed more than just their affair, it had forced me to confront my own capacity for rage and revenge. I had crossed a line, and now there was no turning back. Tonight had changed everything, and I had no idea what the aftermath would hold. But as I stepped into the cool night air, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had taken control, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope that I could reclaim my life, one shattered piece at a time.